saying, the topic for today's lecture is using SQL Server from within ASP.NET. As I was mentioning, I have several videos that you can take a look at on your own time on how to install SQL Server and SQL Server, the Management Studio, and how to start the database. Here I have SQL Server Management Studio, and you can create various schemas. You can create tables. You can interact with those tables. We're only going to use it to create the database. Okay, so I'm going to create a database for this lecture, and I'm going to call it the name of this course. So it's CS. I'll call it CS5610. Okay. Right now it has no tables. Right? So we're going to do that on the Visual Studio side. Right. So we'll connect to it. Again, I have videos on how to connect to a database. Let me close that for now, and let me start Visual Studio and open the website that we've been using throughout the course. So let's Essentials. There it is. We'll open it. I already created a connection. Well, maybe not. Let's see, database connection. Let me refresh. I don't have a connection. Okay. I'll say refresh. Let's see. Oh, I do have it. Okay. I do have one over here. We can create another one. We can say add connection. It'll ask for the where is what machine is this? Where's the server running? Right, physically. Right. And if we saw earlier was under this particular machine, which is called Jose Surface. And the instance name of the SQL server that is running here, I believe is called SQL Express. Okay, and we can test the connection to see if indeed it finds that instance. Okay, so it is connecting to the server. We can choose a particular database we want to connect to. This goes out to the database and to the server, to the database server, and says, what databases are there. Notice that we have the database that we just created, right? CS5610. We'll connect to that, and we'll say OK, and it creates for us a brand new connection that we can use for this lecture. Okay. If we open it up, we'll notice that there are no tables. Right? There are no tables, so we can start adding tables here. Let's create maybe let's create a table where we can put all sorts of courses, right? And reviews. People can review courses. So let's create a table and let's call it courses. When you add a table, it adds a visual editor that allows you to create the table, and the editor has two portions. It has the bottom half is the textual representation of the schema of the table that you're about to create, and the bottom one is the visual grid of representation, and they're connected. As you interact with one, it updates the other. Right? So here we can give it the name of the table. We'll call it course, and I like to use again, just like we were looking at earlier in MongoDB, I like to use the singular version for my schema and my entities. Okay, so it's course. The brackets are optional. That's if you to make sure that if you're using some special characters, right? The square brackets allow you to escape those special characters. Notice that it creates at least one field in my database, in my table, right? The ID field. And it declares it as a primary key, right? This is to guarantee that at least one field is unique, right? And that one particular field can be referenced from other tables, right? That you can create relationships between tables, okay? Such as, for instance, this is a review for that course, right? This review is for that course, right? A course might have many reviews, and the way those reviews refer to the course is through a foreign key, which we'll do in a minute. You have a question? Okay. Right, so if you want to split up your data, you need these primary keys and foreign keys. So I'm going to add here an additional. Just as it stands, whenever I'm going to create a record when I create a new course, I will need to provide that ID, right? And that ID would have to be unique. I would have to guarantee, as I create the courses, I would need to make sure that that ID is unique. Or I can delegate that to the database, right? And say, hey, you know what? I don't want to deal with coming up with the next unique ID. I'm just going to delegate that to the database, right? You deal with it, right? You choose the next index for my unique identifier for this record, right? So we'll create here. Let's see. We'll create a title for the course. We'll choose varchar. Okay, and we'll allow this to be null, comma. Notice that as I type at the bottom, right, the top half is updating. Okay, so they're synchronized as I interact with this. Or if I type at the top, right, so this course has a price. Notice that at the bottom is updating as well. Okay, so these are both synchronized. And I'll choose the type float. All right, that's enough. Right, that's what we want so far. Well, maybe we'll have a description. We'll have a description, description, and I'll use varchar, and choose that. I want to be able to type quite a few paragraphs for the description of this course. Okay, everybody okay? All right. All right. Okay, so this has not yet been created in the database. This is only still local to my Visual Studio, right? I have not yet pushed this to the database. To push it to the database, we can click on Update, and it'll tell me, okay, I'm parsing it. Everything looks okay. Do you want to push it to a database? And say, yes, update the database, right? So this is going to actually interact with the SQL Server and actually create this database, this table. If we go to the server, notice that if we refresh, we'll see that that table has now been created. Okay, pretty good. All right, so very good. And now my course right now is empty. Let me close this. We're done interacting with the table. If I right-click on the course, I can ask for the table data. Right, I can right-click and select table data. Right, and notice that right now there are no records for this table. I get one column for every field. Right, here's description, price, title. Right, and so for instance, for the title, I might say that this is ASP.NET, price, and description. Copy. Oh, I can't paste. Okay. Anyway, that's a description, right? When I tab, notice that the ID. You see the ID? The ID has been automatically created for me, right? That's because I used the identity, right? So that it is responsible. Notice that it doesn't actually let me type. It doesn't let me type and select an ID, right? Because I configure it so that the database will be responsible for that identifier. So we're going to have here Java 101. Description Java. Here will be maybe C# 101. C#. And finally maybe Node.js 101. All right. So every time I've done this, right, as I tab all the way through, it does an insert into a database, right? So it's updating the database. If I change this, right, and I tab away, it's doing an update, right? So it's interacting with the database, updating, inserting, right, selecting, but to show me all the data that is already there in that table. Okay. All right. So there we have a table there. Now we want to be able to start, creating some user interface to be able to interact with this. We want to create applications, right, that allow us to interact with the database, right? So to do that, right? We let's create a couple of experiments that illustrate how we could interact with the database, right? First, we'll use the components that are out of the box in Visual Studio. Next week, we'll start looking at a little more sophisticated ways to interact with it programmatically, running our own code, as opposed to using the out-of-the-box components that Visual Studio gives us. Although they're very powerful, right? You really have to find some specific edge cases, right? That cannot be met with these components. If you really want to customize the interaction, then yes, you need to fall back into your own, create your own way of interacting with it, right? And write your own SQL statements, your own everything, right? But let's see what Visual Studio gives us out of the box. Okay. All right. So let's create here a directory where we can create a couple of experiments, and let's create our first web page that interacts with SQL Server. So this will do hello SQL. Okay. So right now it's just a plain old HTML ASP document, right? And we'll say here just hello SQL. I will run it just to see that this is actually running. It is actually working. All right, there it is. So hello SQL. So one of the first components that we're going to take a look at is the grid view, right? Grid view is one of those nice components that SQL Server gives you that automatically connect to the database and allow you to interact with tables that are in there. They're very, very powerful, and allow you to do a lot. Most of the CRUD operations that you would typically want to do on these databases, right? So let's look at using those components, right? To use those components, notice we're going to be using the toolbox, right? Where you can find all the components that are available in Visual Studio. You'll notice that many of them we used last week, like label is here, right? The ASP label that we looked at last week is here. You can just drag it into the page, right? And notice that it adds the label with some default values. It already says run at server, some text, some default text, right? And there's quite a few other components, right? Which other ones we looked at last week? Let's see. We looked at label. We looked at button. There's button, right? We can just drag it in there. There it is, right? And also text box. We looked at text box last week, right? So here it is. You can drag just text box. If you run it, it'll be what you expect, right? There it is. The label, the button, and the text area that we looked at last week. But there's quite a few other components that there's quite a few, right? And we're definitely not going to get a chance to go through all of them. But I like to look at a different family of components, the data family of components, right? There's a few here that are dedicated to interacting with data, interacting with databases or any data source, any type of data source, right? But mostly databases, right? That's where they shine. That's what we're going to be using mostly, right? One of them in particular is the grid view. Right? The grid view is a component that allows you to connect to a database, right, and retrieve data from that database and display it graphically as a table. So let's drag one of these components, right? To drag it in here, I'm actually going to change. Notice that all these pages have we've been using the source view for all these pages that we've been working throughout the semester, right? But notice that there's a couple more ways to look at it. One of them is the design view, which gives you a preview of what this might look like if this would be executing on a browser, right? So this gives you a nice preview. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the grid view onto the page, right? And notice that it gives you a preview on what this grid view will render, right? It will render a heading, several columns, several rows, right? But notice that it has a very generic content, right? Column 0, 1, 2, 3, and the content is on the rows is just ABC, right? That's because we haven't connected to a data source. It doesn't have a place to actually go out and fetch data from, right? You can choose the data source. You can either create a brand new one, right? But we already have one, right? We created one recently. And the easiest way to just use that data source, right, is to go to the server and just have that table, right? If you drag that table right onto the page, you can generate this grid view and connect it immediately to the data source, right? The data source being the table in the database, right? So we can just drag this over, right, and drop it in there, and it creates a grid view for us, right? Look at that grid view. It's already connected, right? It's connected to the it creates a connection string that connects to that CS5610 database and that particular table in that database, right? Notice that it parsed the schema, right? Notice that it grabbed the names of the headers are the names of the fields in that table. See that? ID, title, price, and description, right? It also knows the data types, right? It knows the IDs are primary key, the title and the description are varchar, so it puts some generic ABC. Also the price, these are floats, right? So it adds 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, right? It doesn't actually show the data until you actually execute the page, right? All right, so let's execute this, and then we'll go in and dig deeper on what has actually been added to my page, right? So let's run this. I believe I have it. I can just refresh. Maybe. No. All right. Let me start the server. Oh, start the server. There it is, right? Hello SQL, and this is the table we were just looking at earlier, right? From within the SQL Explorer, right? From the SQL, we could see the table, and this is the data. This is the actual data that we added, right? Notice that it's showing all the columns, all the rows, right? And this component is fairly sophisticated, right? It has quite a few nice configurable things, right? Let's play around with it before we look at the behind the scenes. One of the things we could do is, for instance, we can enable editing. We can enable deletion, right? If you enable these, right, notice that it adds to the left-hand side a link, a new column, and then links to each row, right? If we save this and refresh, okay, notice that the link is there, right? Notice that if I click on the link, right, it re-renders the entire page and re-renders a table so that particular row that I clicked edit on, right, it replaces all the fields with text boxes. You see that? Input fields, right? And it replaces the edit link with update and cancel. If I do cancel, I go back to my original view, right? If I click edit, right, I have the fields, and I can actually type this, right? So 2 and 1, right? And it's 334, right? If I click on update, notice that the data has been updated, right? This actually went out, right, and did an update on the database with the new data, right? Very nice. I mean, it would have taken me quite a while to write something like this, right? Other things we can turn on. Notice that when you highlight, right, you get this arrow on the right-hand side, this little button that allows you to format and configure your grid view. Notice that below is also the data source, right? So it adds two components, really, two components. One is the grid view, and the other one is the data source. The data source is the one component that connects to the database, right, and exposes that that data source as a variable that can be then connected to the grid view, right? Let's very quickly take a look at what it gets generated. Let's hook up, select the SQL data source and go into the data source and notice that into a source and notice that it highlights. This is the data source that was highlighted, right? So in the design, it's this down below, right down below, and it's this here. What is it? It's a component, right? Notice that has ASP : and then SQL data source, right? Notice that it's a tag, right? It's an element. It's an HTML element. Well, it's not an HTML element, right? It's an ASP element, right? And inside, in the body of this ASP element, we have several other elements, right? We have the delete parameters, insert parameters, update parameters. Okay. So what are those? Let's look at what those are. And that's it, right? That's all it is. So SQL data source, right? And then you have all these parameters down inside. So in the SQL data source, notice that it has an ID, right? Meaning I am exposing that connection to a database through this ID. Anybody who wants to use this connection to a database as a source of data can use this identifier. And that's exactly what the grid view is doing. The grid view, right? It's this one over here. It has its own ID, but it's saying where, it's saying where am I getting the data that I'm displaying, right? I am getting it from, there it is, the data source ID is this SQL data source one, right? Which happens to be the name of our SQL data source down here. See that? Right, so it says I am getting it from that data source, okay? That data source knows how to interact with the database, right? All the inserts, the updates, the deletes, and whatnot. I'm just getting the data that data source is giving me, right? It's giving me to me as a form of some collection, right? Some tabular format, right? That not necessarily represented in relational model, right? Some object model in RAM, right? That represents the data that was extracted by the SQL data source, okay? All right. Let's see. All right. So the data source, if we look at the attributes, right? Obviously we have the ID, right? Definitely we have the run at. We have the connection string that it says what database we're connecting to, what we are connected to 5610, right? But then there's a couple of commands, a couple of attributes here that where you can configure or are already configured all the commands, all the SQL commands that it's using to interact with the database, right? So so for instance, you have a delete command, you have an insert command, you have a well, the provider, we don't care about the provider. We have a select command, and we have, I believe, an update command. There it is. All right, so we have the 4 basic CRUD operations, right? We can delete, and this is the SQL that it's using, right? Delete from the course table where ID, and then some at ID. What's that? Well, that means that it's you have to provide me the ID. What is it that you want me to delete, right? I need to be told what particular record you want me to delete. So that's a parameter, right? It's a parameter. The insert command, here it is, it's inserting blah blah blah, all the fields, right? And the values, and the values have to be given to me by a parameter, right? You have to give me the actual values, right? Update, same thing. We used update, right? We used update. We just did it, right? We updated it, and what do we do? We set the title to whatever title parameter, what price parameter, what description parameters we give it for that particular record that we're in the particular record that we're updating, right? And finally, there's a select command that selects everything, right? Selects everything, the ID, the title, the price, the description for the course. It selects all of them, right? All the records, right? Now, for these parameters up here, right? Down here, those parameters need to be configured. You need to tell it where to grab those parameters, right? That ID. Where do I get that ID? Where do I get the title? Where do I get the the price, the description? Where do I get them from, right? Well, by default, they are configured to be bound to the to the fields that are used by the grid view that has exactly the same names, right? So it says, where am I getting those values? Oh, from the grid view. The grid view generates for me a form, right, where I can type the title, I can type the description, I can type the price, right? And those values are the ones who I'm going to use for the update command. So the update command says, you know, I grab it from here, right? Insert, we're not using insert. Delete, we haven't turned on delete. We haven't turned on delete. All right, so that's enough. Let's look at turning on other things here. Let's turn on delete. Right, notice that it adds delete on the left-hand side. We can go here and refresh. Wait. What? Stop it. There it is. So I can edit, cancel, right, or delete. If I delete, it actually blows away that particular record. Right, it's gone. Right. Now notice that the look and feel is not very pleasing. Right. For one of the things that I don't like is when I click on edit. Notice that the whole table, like, you know, moves. Right. So instead, what we might want to do is move that column, move it to the right-hand side, perhaps, right? It's more natural on the right-hand side. So you can click on this, and it says, you know, you can edit the columns, right? So here, it's an editor that allows you to manipulate these columns, right? So for instance, we have a column for each one of the fields, right? ID, title, price, and description. And you notice that on the right-hand side, you have buttons that allow you to move them up and down, so you can change the ordering of those columns. Definitely command. I'm going to move it all the way down, right? Yep, there it is. So I'll save that. I'll save. And can I refresh? Really? There it is. I moved them to the right-hand side. So now when I click on edit, oh, it still moves. Well, it still replaces because it replaces for the input fields, right? But at least the left-hand side is stuck to the left-hand side, right? It's flush. So cancel, edit, cancel. Okay. Other things that can be configured are the look and feel. You can go to auto formatting and choose a format. Here's a colorful one: classic, professional, autumn, snowy. Not snowy, no. I'm sick of snow. Simple. Let's use the classical. The classic one is, you know, blue, kind of like the Windows look and feel with bluish and interlaced cyan, right? So let's save that and let's refresh. There it is. So this is the look and feel, right? That you can change. Obviously, this doesn't look at all like our Bootstrap that we've been using throughout the course. So instead, what we might want to do is put this in its original format. You know, just remove format. I don't want any format. I want to use Bootstrap instead to format this. So we can go out to Bootstrap. And copy the link and paste it here, way at the top, right? You can say here at the head, just that, and maybe add, you know, some look and feel. Maybe this div, we'll call it container, and now notice that the grid view is being rendered as a table, right? I mean, if you look at the source, right? If you look at the source, indeed it's using the HTML table to render this, right? Tables and rows and whatnot. You see that? But in the source code, in our source code, there are no tables. We don't see any tables here, right? We just have grid view, right? There is no table, HTML table element here, right? And all these attributes are really not part of the table attributes, right? These are attributes of the ASP grid view component, right? So what we want to be able to do is say, we want to tell the grid view, hey, grid view, I know you're using the table as a back, you know, in the back to render this. Well, I want that table to use a particular CSS class, right? To do that, notice that if I start typing class, it is not one of the available attributes, right? If you leave class there, it's going to give you an exception saying, no, I don't know that attribute. I couldn't parse. I don't know what it means, right? Instead, what they have is they have their own attribute, right, called a CSS class, right? Which basically at the end, what it does is that it adds a class attribute in the resulting HTML table, right? And adds the class, whatever class we give it, right? So we say, I want you to use table and table striped. Okay. So now if I refresh, there it is, class, table, and table striped. Right. If I refresh here, there it is. Right. So it's rendering more like a the Bootstrap application that would become familiar with. Right. Everybody okay? All right. Yeah, that's what we're doing, right? Yes, yes. In my class, you can use Bootstrap. Okay. I know there's been a couple of questions on whether you can use Bootstrap. Yes, you can use Bootstrap. The only place where you cannot use Bootstrap is in the home page. And your home page has to look spectacular. Okay. Remember, 20% of the grade is based on that home page. Okay. It has to be responsive, right? It has to have access to all the different sections, right? Your experiments, your projects. It has to say something about you, right? Your things that your favorite things to do. Describe you as a developer. Things that you would be proud to show as in a resume, right? To use a link in your resume, right? You want to look how great I am? Go take a look at my homepage. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. So notice that one of the things that we can't do here, one of the things that we can't do is insert new data. Right. There is no option here in the design, right, where we can insert. Yeah, there's no option for insert. It would be nice if you had enable insert, right, and it would add an additional row, right, that would allow you to enter data, right? But that's fine. That's okay. We can add our own insertion, right? So let's work on that. Let's work on that. Okay. All right. So let's see. What we're gonna do is gonna add. We're gonna add another page. A page that allows us to insert new records. Okay. So let's do that. Let's see. What we could do here is add a new page, right? And we'll call it 010 insert. Okay. And in this insert, what we're going to do is we're going to use a component, another component in our toolbox, call the details view component. Right? The details view component allows you to, the grid view allows you to see many records all at once, right? Whereas the details view allows you to view one record at a time. Okay, so like for instance, you might show hundreds of records using a grid view, but if you and maybe the grid view could give you a navigational to view the details of a particular record, right? That you can show in a separate table. So the details view can be used for that, right? To look at the details, right? So it would be like a read-only version of all the fields in that particular record, or it can also be used for updating, right? Modifying a record, or inserting and creating a new record. Okay, so let's add a details view. Now, if we add the details view, okay, notice that it's going to ask us to, what data source do we want to connect? Okay. If I create a data source, I'm going to have to write all the SQL and that I need to be able to insert, right? And I'm kind of lazy today, so instead of doing that, what I'm going to do, right? Notice that when we drag the table in here, when we drag the table in the data source, it added tons of really useful SQL, right? Okay. So what I like to be able to do is use the same, right? The same data source that was used by the grid view. I mean, the grid view is using it to do what? To retrieve all the elements, right? It's using it to update, right? To delete. The only other thing that we did not use here is the insert, but I did create the SQL for to use it, right? There it is. That's the insert, right? So I want to reuse. I want to kind of reuse this, right? So one lazy way of doing this is to first drag over the whole table. Now, what this is going to do is not only going to create the SQL data source, it's also going to create the grid view. But what I really want is to keep around is the SQL data source, right? I don't care about the grid view, right? I really want the data source, right? So this is a very quick way of creating that data source. I'm going to drop it in there. Notice I have the data source, but I really don't care for the grid view. I'm going to remove it, right? But I'm keeping the SQL data source, right? Meaning that in there, right, I do have all those deletes and inserts are there. There they are, right? Okay, very good. So I have that. So what I really want here, right, is to add the details view. Where is it? The details view. I'll drag it right here. The details view. I'll put it right above it. There it is, and tell it to use that data source that we just dragged in. Okay, there it is. So notice that it's using that data source. It renders it, instead of rendering it every row, right? Here was rendered just one row, right? And then it's using one row per field as opposed to one row per record. This would be one single record, right? Would be one single record, and it would show me the values of a particular record, right? By default, it will show me the data for the first record by default, right? What we want to do is configure this so that we can use it for insertion. I want to be able to insert, okay? We can configure this. We can go to its properties, right? And we can start saying, okay, let's see. We want its behavior. We want to notice by default, the default mode is that it's read only. Meaning it's only going to show values. If I run this page, here's my details page, right? Here's my details page, and notice that it's showing me the first record, right? If I go to my grid view, notice that this is my first record, ASP.NET 123 description 1, right? There it is. That's the data for the first record. That's the default behavior, right? Now, for insertion, we don't really care to view data, right? There is no data. It's a brand new record I'm going to insert, right? So what I can do here, let me actually maybe put an ID, put an H1 here. Create new course. Okay. Create new course. What I want to be able to do is go to its properties. Oh, I need to stop it. To its property and say that I don't want the read-only version. I want, and you can say, what do you want? Do you want it to be in what status do you want it to be? You want it to be in edit mode or insert mode, right? Edit mode means that it would show you a record with the values of a particular record, and then you can update the values of that record, and then click on update, and it'll update that record. Or insert, it'll show it to you empty, right, with no values, right, because you're going to give me the original the values, right, of something that doesn't exist yet. Okay. All right, let's save that. All right, if I re-render this, it shows it to me with title, price, and description. Notice that it does not show me the ID. Right, it's a primary key. It's auto incremented. Right, so I'm not supposed to give you the ID. Right, it's going to figure out what the ID is. So it doesn't even allow me to see it. Okay. Other things that I can turn on is edit fields. I can there's some command fields I can add. I can add new insert or edit or delete. Right, I can add those things. So let me add new insert. And notice that I put it at the bottom. Let's say OK. Hello. Okay, save. Now if I refresh, notice that it adds at the bottom. Maybe no. It adds the insert and cancel. Let's see if they work. Let's see. We have here 3. Let's add another one. Let's add Angular.js. Okay. How's that? Let's go here and say title Angular Angular.js 101. Description Angular. The insert. Okay, it didn't give us any feedback that it actually inserted it, right? But let's go back here and let's refresh. And indeed, Angular has been inserted, right? So our insert is working. It looks like it's working. But there's a couple of things that we might want to do, right? For instance, the description. Notice that it's using just a text box, right? That's it's a one-liner, right? Typically, we would want to make this a little more, bigger. Maybe even make it a text area, right? We would like to format this a little more, right? And also, these are links. They look pretty ugly. Why don't we style them with Bootstrap, right? So let's bring Bootstrap again into this, right? So let's look in here, right? And let's add Bootstrap at the top. And let's configure this a little bit. So let's say that this is a container. What else do we want to do? Let's see. If we render this, let's see what we have so far. Okay, it looks a little prettier. But notice that these are input fields. They're not using the style form control that we're so used to. So what we could do is in the design we can say, it's using its own template on what it's rendering, right? It's using its own. I'm going to use a table, 2 columns, and then a row for each field. Well, we can override that and says, well, give me the template so I can modify that template, right? So for instance, what I could do, I can edit the fields, right? And I can say description, right? Convert this field into a template field. Okay. Right now, each one of these, right, is just being rendered by these ASP. You see that? This ASP bound field. That's just configuring, right? What fields I want to show, whether they're read only, right? Whether I'm using a text box and whatnot, right? What I want to do is for it to give me an entire template that I can modify the HTML in it. Okay, because I want to be able to plug in my own HTML in there, right? Okay, so I'm going to do a design. I'm going to say, well, that particular field, edit field, that the description, for instance, I want to, instead of being a text, just one line, I want it like a text area that give me more space to paste longer descriptions. Okay, so I'm going to convert that into a template field and say okay. All right. Well, as far as we can tell, nothing has happened. Right. Let's save that and let's refresh. As far as we can tell, nothing has happened. Nothing has been changed. But if we look at the source code, we'll notice that now that particular field. Notice that the other ones are still bound field, right? ID, title, and price. You see that? But for the description field, for the description, what it has done is has created 3 templates. One that will be shown when you're editing, one that will be shown when you're inserting, and the other one just to show with a read only. Okay? So since we're inserting, right, this is a template that I want to modify. Okay? Notice that it's using text box. Notice that it's using text box, right, to render that field, right? It's giving it a name. It's binding it to that field description, blah, blah, blah. Well, what we're going to do is that we're going to modify this. So I want a text area instead, right? What we can do here is we're going to look at the text mode. The text mode, we can configure how many that we want a multi-line. You see that? We want multiple lines, not just that one single line. What's that going to do is that it's going to modify this. If we inspect right now, we'll see that it uses just a regular input field. It uses a regular input field, right, to render that. That's what text box single line renders to by default. But by doing it multi-line and refreshing this, notice that it becomes a text area, right? Which I can make it much bigger, right? And paste much more descriptive text, right? I can go further and provide my own CSS, right? I can say the CSS that I want to use is a form control. Okay, notice that it has the rounded around it, right? See that? But all the other ones look ugly still, right? So let's change all of them. Let's change all of them. Also, I might want to give it that text box. I might want to give it a default width. We can say the width. I want it maybe 200 pixels. Maybe the height. I may want to have 100 pixels. There they are. Okay. I might want to configure this over here. Maybe I also want to configure the. Notice that it's using a table to render this, right? So I might give the a CSS to the view, which I want to use a table, just table. Let's see how that renders. That's going to add padding and margins, right? So that things look a little prettier, and also the labels are at the top as opposed to in the middle. Right? That looks ugly. How about these over here? Let's fix those too. Right. So we'll go and configure this. I'll go back to editing fields. You know what? All of these, the title and the price, both of them are going to convert to a template. I'm going to say OK, and go in here. And now both fields, the title field and the price field, have been converted to template fields as opposed to bound fields, right? And each one has its own, edit template, insert template, and item template, right? Each one for editing, for insertion, or for read only. Right. So the only thing I'm going to change here is that for the title, right, for the text box, I'm just going to change the CSS. I'm going to say that this is a form control, right? So that's the only thing I'm going to add. Also for the text box for the price, I'm also going to add the CSS class, so that now they all look like the Bootstrap input fields that we're accustomed to. Everybody okay? All right. The only thing, other thing that we might want to configure is those links. Although they don't look too ugly, one of the things we might want to do. Notice that right now they're rendered by this command field, right? That's all it's being rendered. I don't actually have the links, right? That I can style, right? Well, I can apply templating also to that one. I can go and select that particular field, select that field, and want to convert it into a template as well, right? And I can go to the source, and now what used to be just a single a single ASP component is now again buttons, right? Actual links that I can style. Okay, all right. So what do we want to do? Maybe what we want to do is that I want the CSS class that I want to apply to these links, Oh wait, this is for, oh, sorry. This is for read only. That's for the read only. These are these are the buttons. There they are. These are the buttons. This is the for the insertion, right? So this is the insert, and this is the cancel. Okay. All right. So what we want to do here is say that the CSS that I want to use here is maybe button primary. Okay. Whereas the cancel, I want to use the CSS class maybe button and then button danger. Okay. So let's re-render that. There they are. So now we're back to something that looks more what we've been working with. And finally, we might want to center these. Okay, we want to center this. So there's a class in Bootstrap for centering. Center, I think it's text center. There we go. So the insert and the cancel are centered. So these work, but notice that one of the things that we would like to be able to do, typically what we would like to be able to do is start the creation process from the summary. So in here, typically what we want to do is have like a button that allows you to insert. You click that button, you go to the insertion page, right? You enter all the values for insertion, and when you click on insert, you come back to this page over here, right? That's how we typically understand, the behaviors between these two pages. Yes. So let's do that. Let's add a button here, right? That will navigate us to this page over here, right? And then once we have inserted, once we're done inserting, we would like to go back to our original page, right? So let's do that. All right. So let's grab this first page, right? And I'm going to save this and call this 020 add create. Okay. So let's see what we're going to do. What we're going to do is that here in this H1, these are course lists. So this is the list of all the courses, right? I'm going to add a button here. Well, actually, not a button, a link, which is just going to navigate me to that other page. I'm going to style it as a button, though. Right, so it looks like a button. All right, so I'm going to say a href is going to navigate to insert. It's going to navigate to that page, right? And this is, I'm going to call it create. Right? And I'm going to style it like a button. So let's see what it looks like so far. Wait a minute. So let's run this. Okay, so right now it's just a link. Right, it's just a link. Let's style it so for it to look like a button. BTN S. And I'm going to make it so that I'm going to push it over to the right-hand side. So I'm going to say pull right. So there it is. So it's create, right? If I click on create, it navigates me to the new course, right? It navigates me here, which is great, right? Let's see. So what we want to do is, right, if we insert something here, and so it's Mongo DB 101 and Mongo DB 101 description. Right, we insert. What we like to have happen is that when I click on insert, I want it to go back to where I came from, right? I want to go back to this one, right? If we refresh, there's MongoDB, right? We'd like to come back here. So let's do that. Right. So instead of this this create button, instead of linking to that insertion page, we're going to link to a new page. We're going to link to 030 return after insert. Let's call that, right? Return after insert. So let's create a page. Let's create a page called that, right? I'm going to go here. I'm going to stop. And I want it to look just like the insert page, right? But I'm going to add a couple things. So copy, paste. And this is going to be the name. New name. Oops. What? What I call it? I called it copy now, add create button. There it is. Copy. How did it work? Solution. And that's the new name. Okay, there we go. All right, so I want to navigate here. Let's see if this works. I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to navigate to 030. Okay, so it navigates to the right one. And here I'm going to add logic for me to go back to where I was. Okay? All right, so to do that, where's my insert button? My insert button is way down here, right? There it is, right? So here we go. The ID is link button 1 and link button 2. One is for the insert and one is for cancel, right? So let's give it an ID here that is more understandable, right? That it's more meaningful. So we'll call this insert button. We'll call this cancel. Okay. And what we want to do is intercept, right? We want to be notified, right? That once the insertion has occurred, right? I want to go back to the page, right? So we can have here an on. Oh. Okay, no, not here. Not here, sorry. Not in this button. We want the whole details view to notify us. There it is. If you say on here, it says, hey, data view, detail, sorry, detail view. Notify me after insertion. See that one of the options? There's on item inserted. Notify me when it has been already inserted. If has been inserted, I want to do something. What is it I want to do? I want to go back to the previous page. Okay, so we're gonna configure this and says I'm gonna create a new event handler. Where is that added? It's being added at the top, right? It's gonna be added at the top in this in here, right? There it is. And what we could do here is just redirect to the page where we came from, the original page where we came from. We could do response.redirect and go back to what's it called? 020 dash add create ASPX. Yes, right? And let's see what happens now, right? Let's reload this. And let's insert here. Let's insert MongoDB. What else did we learn about? Bootstrap. All right, so bootstrap description. And I click on insert. And there it goes. It goes back, right, to my original page. And we have Bootstrap listed there. We go create. Notice that cancel is still here. I can't, but we would want the same behavior, right? What we want to do is have our page also notify us. Let's see, is there on cancel? There isn't. There is no event that tells me that I want to go back. Okay. What we could do, we could do it two ways. One way we could do is go here and in the cancel, right? In the cancel button, right? Where is it? Here's a cancel button, right? We could have an on click. Let's say on click, right? And generate an event, a brand new event. Right? and just go back. Or we could have grab a catch-all. If any button is clicked, right? If the command name is cancel, then go back. Right? But this one's what we'll do. Right? So let's refresh this. Okay, and if I click cancel, it goes back to the course list. That makes sense? Pretty good. All right. All right, so I can go create, I can cancel, or insert a brand new one. So I can say create, and we learned about HTML5. Insert, it goes back, and we have the HTML5. All right. All right. The other thing that I would like to be able to do is update or view the details of that course. So to do that, I would like to have like a link here, right? That if I click on that link, it takes me to that other page, okay? It's like a details page. So let's do that. Let's add a details link, right? So let's go here, and I'm gonna add here. So copy paste. Call this 040. Add details link. Okay. All right. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to add, something like a link here that will, allow us to navigate, just like this create navigated to another page. Yes. But that page was fixed, right? That page will always render the same thing, right? Over here, instead, we're going to have all sorts of links, right? And depending on which one we click on, it should show you the details for that particular course, right? So each course should have its own link, right? And it should show the details for that particular course. Make sense? Right? So what we want to do here is add an additional link. So for instance, we can say edit columns, and I want to add a new field, a hyperlinked field, right? Like an actual link. I can add that, okay, and then I can configure it. Wait, hyperlinks. And wait a minute. Wait a minute. Cancel. Add new column. Okay, no. Add new column. This is what we're gonna do. Add new column. There we go. So I'm gonna add a brand new column, right, dedicated for that hyperlink. Right? I'm gonna say I want a hyperlink. Here it is, hyperlink. Okay. And the text, I can either specify the text, right, or I can say that that it should take the actual text, right. I want it to be grabbed from an input field, and I want to use the title, right, and I want to create a hyperlink, and the text of that hyperlink, right, will be grabbed from the value of the field title. So the title will be your Java 101, ASP.NET 101, and so on and so forth, right? Those are the titles, right? So the text of the hyperlink will be the value of the field title, for each one of the hyperlinks. Yes. Well, because I want it to be so that if you click on the title, it'll navigate to the details of that tab. Now we already have a column that shows the title, right? And now we're going to have like two columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the old one that shows the title, right? And we're going to replace it with this one. Right? So let's give it here. And now, so that's going to be the text of the hyperlink. Now I have to tell it, well, okay, it's a hyperlink. Where do you want to go? Right? Where do you want to go when that hyperlink gets clicked? Okay. So what we want to do is it could be a hard-coded URL, right? that I always want to go, always to the same place, or it could be a dynamic URL, right? A URL that is mostly the same, right? But it's parameterized a little bit, right? It will be different. And I want to do this because my URL is that I want to go to a page that shows me the details, but I need to tell that page the details of whose details you want to see, right? So I need to pass it, right, a parameter saying, oh, is the details for course 1, 2, 3, or is the details for course 2, 3, 4, right? I need to pass it, right, as a parameter, the details of the ID of the course that I want to see. Make sense? Right. So the data field that I want to use is the ID, right? Because the ID field, right, has the value of the course that I want to view, right? And the URL is down here. I want to say I want to go to 050 details, right? Here's the details page, .aspx, okay? And I want to pass it as a query string. I want to pass it course ID. That's the name of the field. And then the value is the value of this ID. Okay. And now this you can have many data fields, right? We're only using the ID field, but you can have many data fields, right? I want to pass it not only the ID. I want to pass the title, the description. I want to pass it a whole bunch of things, right? Over here, we're only passing the ID. Okay. So in this format, once you've given me all the IDs, I can then tell you in what order I want to pass them, to generate the dynamic URL. So I can say the first one, the first ID, I want it here, rendered here, right? Rendered after the equal sign. Okay. All right. Let's say okay. I'm going to save. Wait, still thinking. Come on. Uh-oh. Visual Studio is busy. Okay, there it is, finally. Okay, let's save that. If we rendered, what number is this? 40, right? Run this. Okay, notice the title. There they are. See that? Right? Notice that it's the same thing as this title. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this title column, and I'm going to place this way up here on the left-hand side, right? So let me change this. I'm going to edit columns. I'm going to move this. I'm going to move it up here after the ID. Okay, and I'm going to remove the title. Okay. And here, the header didn't have anything, so I'm going to change the header to be title. Also, notice the ID. Do I really want to show the ID? Well, maybe not, right? So I'm just going to say, I'm going to remove that field. I'm going to say, okay. Still busy. Come on. Hello. Okay, there it is. So I'll save and refresh. And the titles didn't show. Why did the titles? I added the title, didn't I? What I did. Edit columns. Title. Header. Text. Title. What? Okay. Why is it not generating the title? Footer, title, price, header, text. Oh, wait, not here. Title, text. Save that. Refresh. Oh, there it is, right? Okay, so notice that if I hover, I have the URL. See that? Most of the URL is hard coded. 050 details.aspx question mark course ID equal, right? That's fixed, right? That's verbatim what I typed. Okay, and then I have a placeholder, right, with the curly bracket 0, right? And that 0 means, hey, use the first field ID, which I gave you, right? You can give me all the ID, all the fields, but I only have one. If I hover over each one, so this one is 2, oh no, actually 3, we deleted 2, right? This one is 4, 5, and whatnot. If I click on it right now, that page doesn't exist, right? So let's create that page, right? Now the page is going to be very similar to the details page that we use for insertion. Right? It's going to be very similar, but instead of insertion, we just want to give it a read-only, right? A read-only display. So let's create a page that has that name. There it is. Let's copy that. Let me stop that. Let's create a page. It's going to look very much like this page, returned after insert. It's going to look very similar to that. So I'm just going to, actually, I'm going to start from scratch. Do I want to copy anything from there? Actually, maybe the SQL data source, I want to keep that. All right, so I'm going to copy that. Copy, paste. And I'm going to call it, what does I call it? It's this, right? Copy and rename this. There we go. Okay. Well, now if I refresh, the page does exist, but it's using the insertion, right? The insertion behavior. We don't want this behavior, right? So we're gonna go back, and what we're gonna do is open it up, go into design. The only thing we want to really keep here is the data source, right? Everything else we're just going to throw away, right? Because this one we heavily customized for insertion, right? The buttons, right? We styled a whole bunch of things, right? Actually, no, we don't have to, right? Because in the source code, remember we have the styles for the item template. This is for the read only, right? This is for the read only. So we already have that, right? We already have that. We just have to tell it that the default mode is the read-only mode, right? Not the edit or the insertion mode, right? So let's do that. Let's go into design. Let's select it. Go into the properties, and the default mode is the insert mode, right? So what we're going to do is the read-only mode. There it is, right? And the read-only mode. The read-only mode is this the display, right? So let me save that, and let me refresh that. Okay, there it is, right? So we have, and it's right now it's showing the first record, right? Remember that by default it shows the first record. Since I haven't told it which record, actually we have, didn't we? What did we tell it which record we want to show? Up here, I am passing as an argument, right, the course that I want to see. But the detailed view, right, is unaware of this course ID equal 4, right? Nowhere have we told it to use that to filter the actual course we want to see. So we have to tell it. We have to tell, hey, when you select, don't select the default first record. Select the one that is, displayed in the URL, right? So let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go here. Okay, and we'll do that actually here in the data source. To the source. Notice that what we need to do is modify the select statement that it's using. Right? It has a select statement here. Let's look at it. Right, that selects all the records, but then it throws them all away and it only keeps the first one. Right? What we want to do is have it be parameterized so that it only grabs the record based on that ID that I'm passing as an argument. Okay. So this input field here, this select statement, what I want to do is say don't select all of them. Excuse me. What we want to do is say select the one where the ID field is equal to some parameter that I'm going to give you. Okay, an ID parameter that I'm going to give you. right? Oh, and I have the update command here. All right, so what we need to do is configure that. I need to tell the SQL data source, where do I get that ID? Okay, and the way we do that is we insert. Notice that we have configuration for the delete, for the insert, for the update, but we don't have anywhere configured the select, right? So what we're going to do here is want to add an additional configuration for the select parameters. Select parameter, there it is. Right. What we want to do here is tell it that this is a query string parameter. It's a parameter that you need to grab from the query string. Okay. So there it is. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to tell you the name of the parameter. This is the name of the parameter in the SQL query, in the SQL command. It's the ID. That's the name of the parameter. It's this over here. So this matches that. Okay. Then I need to configure the type. Right. So, make sure for SQL injection. Right. Make sure parse it. Make sure that it's an integer. Right, that it's not some bogus, some escape characters that can do us harm. This is an integer 32. Parse it out, right? Strongly typed, right? Also tell it, okay, this is a query string. In the query string, you can have many fields, right? Right now, we only have one, course ID. But you can have all sorts of parameters, right, in the query string. We have to tell it which one to grab it from. And I'll tell it, and here we can configure that. The query string field is called course ID. Parse it out from the course ID in the query string. Okay, that's it. Okay. So if we go back here and we click on course ID, right? Notice that it returned number 4. See that? If I go 1, returns ASP. If I return 2, actually there's no 2, right? If I say 2, it doesn't show anything because there is no record 2, right? Or I can say 3, right? I can say 4 and whatnot. Right, and that's exactly what we wanted, right? So let's go back to our course here, right? And if I click on this, it takes us to ASP. Or if I click on Angular, it shows us Angular. Or if it's HTML5, it shows the details for HTML5. Make sense? Yes. I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Thank you. Right, yeah, so I copied from an old page, right? So here we're going to say course details. How's that? Course details, right? And maybe have a link to go back, right? Maybe a link that just takes us back to where we were, right? Maybe have a link here. href that takes us back to the details, right? And this is styled as a button danger and pull left. Right, so it allows you to click back so we can go back to where we were. Right? Okay. All right. So the next thing that we might want to do is, if you have a course, maybe that course might have lots of reviews, right? Or maybe you want to create a new review, things like that, right? So what we want to be able to do is create a relationship and maybe have an additional table that displays all the reviews for that one course. So let's create a different table that can show many reviews for that course. Okay, so let's create a table called reviews. Okay, primary key, same thing. I'm going to do an identity here, right? And this will have a title for the review, right? The actual content of the review, right? So this is the actual review. So this is let me use the this over here. So I'm going to say this is the review, and this is going to be varchar max. Now both of them can be null. I'll save that. I'm sorry. the next thing I need to tell it that this is a review for a particular course, right? This is the classical one-to-many relationship, right? Where you have one course, and you have many reviews, right? And UML do capture like this, right? You have one course, many reviews. And the way to implement this is that the course needs a primary key, which it already has, right? And then the relationship needs a foreign key that links to the course, right? So that all reviews, every review knows what course they belong to, okay? So to do that, right here we have, we're going to add a field here, and then it's going to be course ID, right? It's going to be an integer, right? And we're going to say that this is going to be a foreign key that references course ID, right? So yeah, so this is going to hold the ID of a course, right? So that each review will know for what particular course is this review, right? So we update this and say update database, right? Oh, and I'm beyond my time, right? Let's continue this on Friday, right? So that what I want to be able to do is in the course list, I want to maybe have a link that shows if I click on it, I can navigate to my reviews, right? So I have a navigation all around my data model, right? We'll do that on Friday.